Hello to everyone listening from around the world. Today's account comes from John Clinton, 38, who shared what happened after his parents gave his twin brother a $4,800 cruise package on Thanksgiving and handed him a $20 scratch lottery ticket, and what he did with the next 6 months after he scratched it. This account has been dramatized to protect privacy. AI narration is used throughout. The experience it describes is real. The card said, "Every little bit counts. Love, Mom and Dad." $20. A $20 scratch lottery ticket. In a greeting card envelope. On Thanksgiving. While my twin brother Mark sat across the table holding a cream-colored folder from a cruise line. 7 nights in the Caribbean, 2 balcony cabins. All inclusive. $4,800. And my mother Barbara explained the itinerary with the enthusiasm of a travel agent who had been planning this particular gift since July. I held the ticket. I smiled. "Thanks, Mom," I said. "Thanks, Dad." And that, in the Clinton household, was the whole story. Except it wasn't. Not even close. Let me tell you who I am, because it matters more than you think. My name is John Clinton, 38 years old. High school history teacher at Glenbrook North in Northbrook, Illinois. 25 minutes north of Chicago, give or take a traffic jam on I-94. I have been teaching for 12 years. I am genuinely good at it. The kind of good where students come back 4 years later and say something changed for them in my classroom, which is the only metric that has ever mattered to me professionally. I drive a 2018 Honda Accord. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Rogers Park, the far north side of Chicago, the neighborhood where people live when they have figured something out about life but haven't been rewarded for it yet. I make $47,000 a year. My twin brother Mark is also 38. He is a cardiothoracic surgeon at Northwestern Memorial Hospital on East Huron Street in Chicago. He drives a black BMW 5 Series that he leases and calls an investment, which is not what a lease is, but I have learned over the years not to correct Mark on financial terminology because it makes holidays uncomfortable. He owns a condo in the Gold Coast that costs more per month than my annual salary divided by 4. He is not evil. I want to be fair about that, the way you are fair about weather. It is not the rain's fault that it rained on your wedding day. Mark is simply the person our parents decided, sometime around 1999 when he got his MCAT score back, was the successful one. That decision had been compounding interest for almost 20 years. I didn't know it yet, but in about 4 hours, one of those decisions was about to pay out, quite literally. Thanksgiving at the Clinton family home on Plainfield Road in Naperville happens the same way every year. My mother makes turkey, green bean casserole, and a sweet potato pie from her grandmother's recipe that is, without question, the single best thing I have ever put in my body. My father Richard sits at the head of the table and says grace, and then carves the turkey with the deliberate authority of a man who has had 30 years of practice and considers it a craft. Mark arrives with expensive wine. I arrive with a dish nobody mentions. This year I brought a cranberry walnut salad that took me 90 minutes to make. Mark brought a bottle of Opus One, $300. My father held it up like a museum curator examining a newly donated artifact. "Mark," he said, "you didn't have to." "I wanted to," Mark said. My salad sat at the end of the table. It was very good. I know because I ate most of it myself. The gift exchange happens after dinner, which is a Clinton tradition established sometime in the 90s, for reasons nobody remembers. After the dishes are cleared and before the football game claims everyone's attention, my mother brings out a shopping bag. She handed Mark the cruise folder first. Of course she did. I watched my brother open it. Watched his face do the thing it does when he is pleased. That specific controlled expansion, like a man whose satisfaction is too large to fit inside a polite expression, but who has had enough practice managing it. He read the itinerary. He looked up at our mother. "Mom," he said, "this is incredible." "You work so hard," Barbara said. "You deserve it." She turned to me then, handed me the envelope. I opened it, read the card. Every little bit counts. Looked at the ticket. Inside my head, $20. She gave me $20. Outside my face, the expression of a man who is genuinely touched. "Thanks, Mom," I said. "Thanks, Dad." My father nodded. My mother patted my hand. Mark was already asking about the departure port in Fort Lauderdale. I put the ticket in my jacket pocket. I ate a second piece of sweet potato pie. I drove home at 9:30 on a Thursday night in November, listening to a podcast about the Byzantine Empire, which is the kind of thing I do that nobody in my family has ever once asked me about. I didn't know it yet, but that $20 ticket in my jacket pocket was about to end 38 years of being the also ran. I scratched it at my kitchen table, not ceremonially. I was still in my coat, keys still in my hand. I scratched it the way you scratch a ticket, with the edge of a quarter, methodically, in the light of the overhead fixture that I keep meaning to replace because it flickers sometimes. First number, second, third. I set the quarter down. I picked up the ticket and held it under the light. I set it back on the table. I sat down very slowly, the way you sit when your legs have made a decision before your brain has caught up. $10 million. Illinois lottery. Cash multiplier. $10 million. I looked at the ticket for 45 minutes, not continuously. I looked away at the refrigerator, at the window, at the street outside where Rogers Park was doing what it does on Thursday nights. Then I looked back. Still $10 million. Okay, I thought. Okay, here is what I did not do. I did not call Mark. I did not call Barbara. I did not call my father. I did not call anyone. I did not open a bottle of wine. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not do a single dramatic thing that would make for good television. I am a history teacher. History has one lesson it teaches more clearly than anything else. The people who act immediately in moments of sudden windfall almost always destroy themselves. Every lottery winner who went broke in 5 years, every inherited fortune burned through in a decade, every windfall that became a warning, the people who take time to think clearly almost always come out on the other side intact. I went to bed. I slept better than I had in years. Monday morning, I called a lottery attorney. Her name was Patricia Holt, office on North Michigan Avenue, 14 years representing lottery winners in Illinois. Her assistant answered. I explained the situation in 2 sentences. Patricia called me back in 40 minutes. Don't cash it yet, she said, before I could say anything else. I wasn't going to, I told her. A pause on her end. Most people do. I teach history, I said. I know what happens to most people. She laughed. It was the laugh of someone who had just decided she liked a client. We met Wednesday. She walked me through everything. The claiming process, the trust structure, the tax implications, the timeline. She had a whiteboard and a legal pad and the specific efficiency of a person who has had this conversation many times and has figured out exactly which information changes the expression on a client's face. Lump sum after federal and state taxes, she said. You're looking at roughly 5.8 million. That's fine, I said. She looked at me over her reading glasses. Most people have a stronger reaction to that number. I was a history teacher making $47,000 a year, I said. $5.8 million is not a problem I need to recover from. The smile of a woman who has found her favorite client of the year. We established the John Clinton Blind Trust that afternoon. She filed the claim on my behalf. The Illinois lottery verified and processed. No press release. No photograph. No giant check. No announcement. Nobody knew. I drove home in the Accord. Made pasta. Watched a documentary about the fall of Constantinople. Completely normal Thursday. I want to tell you about the 6 months, because the 6 months are the whole point. The money cleared in December. I did not touch it for 30 days. This also sounds easier than it is. $5.8 million sitting in a trust account while you go to work every morning and eat lunch in your classroom. And drive home in a 2018 Honda Accord requires a specific kind of discipline that I am not sure I would have had if I were a different person. But I am this person. And this person had spent 38 years watching what happens when money makes decisions instead of people making them. I was going to make the decisions. The money would follow. After 30 days, I called Greg Fontaine, fee-only financial advisor in Lincoln Square, the North Side Chicago neighborhood with the old German bakeries, and the farmer's market and the organic coffee shop where the barista knows your name. After the 3rd visit, Greg came recommended by Patricia. Fee-only means he charges you directly and has no incentive to put you in financial products that benefit him more than you. which is the only kind of financial advisor worth having. We met on a Saturday morning in January at his office on Northwestern Avenue. "What do you want your life to look like?" he asked. Nobody had asked me that in 38 years. I thought about it for a full 30 seconds, which is longer than it sounds when someone is watching you. "I want to keep teaching," I said, "but I want it to be a choice, not a necessity. I want a house. I want to travel, the kind where you go somewhere and actually learn something, not the kind where you get a wristband and an all-inclusive buffet." I looked at him. "I don't want to perform wealth. I want to have it quietly and use it well." Greg wrote something on his whiteboard. "You're going to be very easy to work with," he said. He built me a portfolio over the following weeks. Diversified, conservative, income generating. He explained every decision in plain English, asked my opinion at every junction, sent quarterly reports I could actually read without a finance degree. By February, the money was working, quietly, without a single member of my family knowing it existed. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these accounts had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, subscribe, and stay with me, because we're just getting to the good part. February. Mark went on the cruise. I know because Barbara sent me photographs on a Thursday evening. Mark and his wife Sandra on a balcony. Turquoise water. Drinks with little umbrellas. The specific visual language of people who are very pleased with their vacation and would like the record to reflect this. "Gorgeous," I texted back. I was in my Rogers Park apartment eating leftover minestrone and reading a book about the decline of the Ottoman Empire. I was, and I want to be precise here, completely fine. That's the thing nobody tells you about the moment you stop needing someone's approval. It doesn't feel like victory. It just feels like the absence of a weight you forgot you were carrying. March. I resigned from Glenbrook North. End of school year. Effective June. I told Tom Ridley, my principal, decent man, fair boss, the kind of administrator who actually reads the lesson plans, that I had a personal opportunity I wanted to pursue. He shook my hand and told me the students would miss me and that I was one of the best teachers he'd worked with. I believed him. I did not tell my family. April. I bought the house. Lincoln Square, 3-bedroom Greystone on North Dammon Avenue. Built in 1928. Original hardwood floors. A back garden that someone had planted with intention. Lavender along the fence. A rose bush near the gate. A small apple tree that the previous owner had apparently named Gerald, a fact I learned from a handwritten note left in the kitchen drawer. I paid cash. Not to show off, because it is more efficient, and I had become a person who valued efficiency. My friend Dennis from the history department helped me move boxes on a Saturday. We ordered pizza. We sat in the empty living room, and Dennis looked around at the exposed brick and the garden view and the coffered ceiling and said, "John, how did you afford this?" "Savings," I said. He looked at me. "You saved enough to buy a house in Lincoln Square, on a teacher's salary." "I've been very careful with money," I said. Dennis is a genuinely intelligent man. He looked at me for a long moment with the expression of someone solving a math problem that isn't adding up. Then he picked up another slice of pizza and let it go, which is one of the reasons we've been friends for 12 years. I didn't know it yet, but in 6 weeks, the question of how I afforded anything was going to answer itself, loudly, and in a way I had not entirely planned for. The call from Mark came on a Tuesday evening in May. I was in my new kitchen, Lincoln Square kitchen, garden view, window open to the evening, making dinner. Chicken thighs, roasted vegetables, a glass of something decent from Greg's recommendation. My phone buzzed. "Mark." "Hey," I said. "Hey." His voice had a new texture, slightly tight, slightly too casual, the specific cadence of a man who has rehearsed his opening line and is now delivering it. "How's things?" "Good," I said. "Really good, actually?" "A beat." "Yeah?" "Good. Listen." He cleared his throat. "Sandra and I are looking at a vacation property. Lake Geneva. Good deal, good timing. Except, we've got a little gap in the down payment. 15,000. Short-term thing. I'd have it back to you within a year." I turned off the stove burner. Silence on my end. "Mark." I said. You know I'm a teacher. I know. I just, I figured maybe you'd had some savings or I can't lend 15,000. I said. I'm sorry. Another pause. Longer than necessary. The pause of a man who has found an answer that doesn't match his question. Right, he said. Okay. No worries. I could hear it in the specific flatness of okay. He had found something he wasn't expecting to find, and he didn't know yet what to do with it. I found out what he did with it 2 days later. Barbara called me at 7 in the morning. 7 in the morning, which is how I knew this was not a casual call. John. Her voice was careful in the way of someone who has had 2 days to compose a sentence and is still not sure she has the right one. Mark told me he asked you for money. He did, I said. He said you told him you didn't have it. I told him I couldn't lend 15,000. But John, a pause. He looked into it. Public records. He found a trust. Morning light on the garden. Gerald the apple tree doing apple tree things outside the window. A trust, I said. He said it's a lottery trust. In your name. Her voice changed. Smaller. John. Did you win the lottery? Yes, I said. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. Longer than any pause in any conversation I have ever had, including the time I waited for my 8th grade students to admit who had written something extremely creative on the whiteboard. When? She finally asked. Thanksgiving night, I said. Another silence. The ticket, she said. Yes, I said. The ticket. Here is what Barbara did not do. She did not ask how much. She did not ask why I hadn't told them. She did not immediately calculate what this meant for the family finances. She was quiet for almost 30 seconds. Then she said, very softly, I never asked you what you wanted. Not, why didn't you tell us? Not, how could you keep this from your family? Not, do you know what Mark is going through with the Lake Geneva property? I never asked you what you wanted. And then my mother, who handed me a $20 lottery ticket while her other son held a $4,800 cruise package, who has called Mark the doctor at dinner parties for 15 years in a tone that implies I am something that came in the other package. My mother started to cry. Not performance crying. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from somewhere real. Mom, I said. I'm so sorry, John. I know, I said. I don't have an excuse. I know that too. We stayed on the phone for a long time after that. Not saying much. Just staying. The apple tree moved in the breeze outside my window. Barbara stopped crying and didn't hang up. I didn't hang up either. It was, honestly, the best conversation we'd had in years. Mark called that afternoon. Gone, the rehearsed casual. Gone, the tight politeness. This was Mark stripped down to the actual question, which is the most direct he has been with me since we were 14. How much? He said. 5.8, after taxes. A beat, the beat of a man recalibrating everything he thought he knew. 5.8, he said, like he was testing the weight of each syllable. And you just said nothing. I built a life, I said. For 6 months? Yes. Without telling anyone? Yes. Why? I had been thinking about the answer to this question since November. I had turned it over every morning on the dock, in the classroom, in Greg's office, in the Lincoln Square garden. I had a lot of answers, and I had been deciding which one was actually true. Because I wanted to know what I'd do with it when nobody was watching, I said. I didn't want to build something to impress you, or to prove something to Mom and Dad. I wanted to build it for me, to know that whatever I made with it was mine, not a performance, not a reaction, mine. Silence. That's... He stopped, started again. That's actually kind of... I know, I said. Another beat. Are you going to help me with the Lake Geneva thing? I genuinely almost laughed. No, Mark, I said. I'm not. The family meeting was Patricia's idea. My father had apparently consulted his own attorney, which told me something interesting about where his head was. My mother was calling Patricia's office. Things were becoming complicated in the way of situations that involve money and family, and the sudden realization that the person everyone had been underestimating had spent 6 months being very deliberate. We met at Patricia's conference room on North Michigan Avenue on a Saturday in June. Clean table, new carpet smell, Patricia at the head, me on one side, my parents and Mark across from me. No. Sandra. Mark came alone, which was the right call and which I noticed he had made without being asked. Points for Mark. Patricia opened it. John asked me to facilitate this conversation. He'd like to be direct, answer questions, and then we're done. He has no interest in conflict. He does have interests he intends to protect. My father looked at the table. My mother looked at me. Mark looked at Patricia with the expression of a man who respects competence. Here's what happened, I said. I won $10 million on a $20 scratch ticket on Thanksgiving night. I established a blind trust, hired an attorney, hired a financial advisor, resigned from my teaching position at the end of the school year, and purchased a home in Lincoln Square. I told no one in this family because I needed the time to make clear decisions for myself without anyone else's input affecting them. The room was quiet. Richard cleared his throat. John, we didn't mean... Dad. I looked at him steadily. I know. This is not an accusation. I'm not angry. A breath. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. Then we'll talk. He nodded. My mother's hands were folded in her lap. I'm not distributing money to family members, I said. Not as a loan, not as a gift, not as a contribution to anything. This is not a punishment. It is a decision I have made and will not revisit. I looked at Mark specifically. Not 15,000, not anything. Mark held my look. One nod. Clean. No argument. What I am doing, I said, is living in my house in Lincoln Square, taking a trip to Portugal in September, deciding what I want to do next, now that what I want to do is an actual option, and being available for a relationship with all three of you that has nothing to do with my bank account. Patricia's hand went flat on the table. Questions. My father asked about the trust, public accessibility, legal exposure. Patricia handled it efficiently and completely. Mark asked nothing. My mother looked at me for a long time and then she asked the only question that mattered. Will you still come for Thanksgiving? Quiet room. Very quiet. Yes, I said. I'll come for Thanksgiving. She nodded. Eyes bright. I'll bring the cranberry walnut salad, I said. Barbara laughed. The real kind. The kind that breaks something open and lets air in. Mark smiled. Actual smile. Not the controlled expansion. Something smaller and more honest. My father looked at the table and said very quietly, I owe you an apology, John. You do, I said. But not today. Today we just need to get the facts on the table. The apology can be a conversation. He nodded. That was enough for now. Portugal was September. 3 weeks. Lisbon, Porto, the Douro Valley wine country, a week on the Alentejo plain where the cork oaks grow, and the evenings turn the color of old copper and the world slows down to a pace that feels like the correct one. I walked every day. I ate food I couldn't always name. I had conversations with strangers in broken Portuguese, and they laughed at my mistakes, and I laughed with them, and nobody knew or cared that I was a former high school history teacher from Chicago who had won the lottery on Thanksgiving night. I was just a man walking around Portugal, learning things. Which is, it turns out, exactly what I wanted to be. I came home with a sunburn and a full notebook, and the specific certainty that I would go back. My mother called on a Sunday in October. We talked for 45 minutes. She asked about the trip. I told her about the cork oaks, about the tram system in Lisbon, about a pastry called a pastel de nata that I am reasonably certain is the best thing I have ever eaten outside of her sweet potato pie. She laughed at the sweet potato pie part. I've always wanted to see Portugal, she said. Come with me next time, I said. She went quiet. The specific quiet of someone for whom something unexpected has just landed. Really? She said. She said she'd think about it. She has called me every Sunday since. Here is what I keep thinking about. In the Lincoln Square kitchen, with the coffee on and the garden outside and no particular place I have to be. The $20 ticket was supposed to say something about my place in this family, about the calculation my parents had been running since 1999. The one where Mark was the investment, and I was the whatever the other thing is. The also ran. The safe bet to undershoot. Every little bit counts. It was a gesture dressed as a gift. And what it actually communicated, what it said clearly, in the specific language of a family that had stopped paying attention, was that they had no idea what I was capable of. People who stop paying attention miss things. They missed 6 months of the most deliberate, documented, carefully constructed period of my life. They missed the attorney and the trust, and the financial advisor and the resignation letter, and the house purchase. They missed the version of John Clinton, who was building something real, and doing it methodically, and doing it without needing anyone to validate the blueprints. By the time they found out, the building was already standing. That is the revenge. Not a confrontation. Not a dramatic reveal at a dinner table. Not a moment where I said, "Look what you underestimated." There was no moment like that, and I did not want one. The revenge is a life they cannot touch. There is something worth sitting with here, beyond the lottery and the family and the Thanksgiving dinner. The version of me that existed before November would have told you he was fine. That the cruise gift was fine. The cranberry walnut salad going unnoticed was fine. Being the less interesting twin at every family dinner for 20 years was fine. I would have said it without bitterness. I would have meant it. What I did not understand then, what the 6 months taught me, is the difference between acceptance and invisibility. I had accepted my place in the family structure. What I had not accepted, at a level I wasn't fully conscious of, was the idea that the structure was accurate. That the version of John Clinton my family had been operating on since 1999 was the correct one. It was not correct. It was just old. The lottery did not change who I was. I was already the person who would go to bed instead of calling anyone. I was already the person who would hire an attorney before cashing the ticket. I was already the person who would spend 30 days sitting with money in a trust account, letting himself get used to the idea of it before doing a single thing about it. That person existed before November. He had been existing for 38 years in a family that had stopped looking. The $20 ticket did not create the opportunity. It created the visibility. Mark and I had dinner in December. Just us. A restaurant in the West Loop he suggested, which cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month, and which I now paid for without thinking about it, which is a sentence I am still getting used to. We talked for 3 hours. We talked about things we had not talked about since we were children sharing a room on Plainfield Road, before the MCAT scores and the BMW and the Gold Coast condo and the cruise, before the narrative calcified. At some point toward the end of the meal he said, "I didn't know who you were." "I know," I said. "I thought I did." He turned his wine glass. "I had this. I had a version of you that I made in like 2001 and I just kept using it." "So did I," he said again, making sure it landed right. "That's on me. Not them. Me." The restaurant was warm and loud and full of people having their own December conversations. "We've got time," I said. "Yeah?" He looked up. "We're 38, I said. "That's not old. That's just the end of the first version." He laughed. "Not the controlled expansion. Something genuine. Something that looked like the mark from the backyard basketball court before the hoop rusted through, and everything got complicated." "Portugal sounds good," he said. "You'd hate it," I said. "There's no golf course within 15 miles of the Douro Valley." "I'd find one." "You absolutely would," I said. We split the check. He didn't argue about it. I didn't make it a thing. That was enough. The cameras are still running. I mean that metaphorically. I am still paying attention, still documenting, still building. Greg sends me a quarterly report in plain English. Patricia checked in last month with a note that said the trust structure was performing exactly as intended. The house on North Dammon Avenue has Gerald the apple tree and lavender along the fence, and a kitchen window that makes the mornings feel like something worth staying awake for. I am writing this from that kitchen. The $20 ticket is framed. I did it myself, found a simple black frame at the hardware store, and hung it on the wall next to the window, which I did partly as a reminder and partly as a joke, and partly because every time I look at it I think about my mother's face, when I said come with me next time, and she said really, and I said really, it is worth $10 million. The really is worth more. The ticket was worth $10 million. That conversation was worth more. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.